what do you make of the fact that now President Biden has signed the bill to declassify all of the origin?
Well, we'll see what he actually declassifies. You know, the deep state knows what it did, and the deep state does not give up its secrets very easily. I was actually shocked when 4,000 pages came out from HHS of Fauci's emails. Even in a heavily redacted state, they were very incriminating. Okay, we know a lot about what was happening there the last couple days of January, early February, where they're assembling the group of people that are experts in this field, and the initial reaction was this is man-made. And that's, by the way, that's my group experts, things like computational biologists. They just think absolutely this is a chimeric, this is a man-made virus. But anyway, so that was the initial reaction from the group until they found out that wasn't favored by Anthony Fauci, and then they did a 180, and all of a sudden, no, that's a conspiracy theory. It's amazing what we already have in the redacted form, but we've now been for 2 years trying to obtain the unredacted emails that were provided under FOIA. They won't give them to us. What they do is they allow us to read them 50 pages at a time, unredacted, take notes. We took the 4,000, narrowed our search down to 400, and they've been doing this 50 at a time. We're down to the last 50 pages. And it's probably been, well, it's many months. They're still not giving us the final 50 pages. So that's where all the incriminating evidence is, right? But again, it's just obvious that Anthony Fauci was covering up his funding that went through various U.S. Actors into Wuhan. And it's also very obvious that they suspected very early on that this absolutely could have been a lab leak. And so why is it a couple days later they're saying that's conspiracy theory? Why are they changing the narrative? Why are they providing misinformation? I mean, I've got an email I'm going to be talking to Secretary Becerra about later today in a Finance Committee hearing, showing that the people here were saying it was about a 50-50 split between natural versus lab. Well, that's not what they said a few weeks later when they said that was a conspiracy theory to even consider a lab leak. So what was going on there? Again, it's just another reason I'm suspicious, I'm skeptical, because what you see there doesn't make any sense. There's no innocent explanation for what we see there.
So now we have a few different sources of evidence that tell us that, at some point very early on, the governance of the pandemic response shifted from HHS to, becoming a national security priority. So something like the NSC or DHS are now involved or perhaps driving it. And then, we've had these pandemic simulations, war games, a couple of which, look remarkably similar to what was actually done.
Identical.
Well, right. So near identical. So, that to me suggests that, whoever was really running things was saying, oh, they believed that these war games were somehow successful, which again, flies in the face of, basic epidemiology, bizarrely. I still have trouble grasping that. But how important do you think was this to the pandemic response?
So on the one hand, when you have CRISPR technology, you have people with pretty unsophisticated labs being able to splice genes, you'd be negligent as a government not to be concerned about that, not to figure out how can we respond if somebody uses this in biological warfare. So that to me seems you'd be negligent if you weren't doing that. So when you realize they're doing some of these simulations, listen, I had hearings with the Blue Ribbon Panel on bio threats. And even the fact that they ran the vaccine through Department of Defense appropriation process, other transactional authority, there can be an innocent explanation on why they would do that. I mean, just even the distribution of it. Nobody else had the distribution capability other than the U.S. military, probably. And you needed something like FEMA, you needed things like DHS. I mean, this is, again, national health emergency. You've got to take extraordinary measures. What concerns me, and I think what is the legitimate concern, is then, okay, taking that route, what safety studies were just completely bypassed? What safety studies continue to be completely bypassed. I've listened to the teleconference they had in October of 2020, CDC, FDA talking about the safety surveillance systems should they get emergency use authorization for the vaccine. And they were talking about VAERS, and I mean, they were going to be looking at that closely. And if there was somebody that had an adverse event that resulted in a couple days of lost time, they're going to have a CDC representative on the phone talking to that individual, getting to the bottom of that. That was total BS. They never intended to do that. They certainly didn't do that. And what they did instead is when the numbers started mounting on VAERS, and by the way, we're up to 35,000 deaths reported worldwide. That may be not proof of causation. It sure gives me cause for concern.
But as you colloquially say 5 minutes ago, VAERS was the system for basically getting a signal, a safety signal, right? And suddenly it became this.
Well, then you have the vSafe system, set up specifically to track this. Now, also set up not to track real serious things. You couldn't put in myocarditis. All you could put is, did you have some days where you had to miss work or school or whatever, or did you seek medical care? I think those are the two basic parameters. But you have what, 25% of the people, the 10 million people that signed up for vSafe, 25% missed work, we're obviously affected, and I think, was it 8% that sought medical care? And then it was Aaron Siri, I think, that had to sue the federal health agencies to release that data. Again, the CDC's job is to gather health information and disseminate it to the public, to the medical profession, in an open and transparent way. It's not to decide not to collect information because they don't want to know the results. It's not to hide the information they do gather. It's not to doctor it and cherry pick what they use to present misinformation. But that's what the CDC is doing. They're not being honest. They're not being transparent. It makes me skeptical.